In just the past hour, the King has delivered a personal message about his experience of cancer and says that his cancer treatment can be reduced in the new year. He shared what he called the good news as part of this year's Stand Up to Cancer campaign, which is run by Cancer Research UK and Channel 4. And we can bring you some of what he said.
According to unconfirmed palace whispers, Camilla was already fleeing Windsor when Prince William and Princess Anne stepped before the cameras to confirm the news the palace had spent hours trying to contain. Her Range Rover shot through a private gate as rain hammered the roof and security officers sealed the road behind her. She carried no public statement, offered no farewell, and refused to return. Inside the castle, King Charles lay surrounded by specialists after a sudden collapse that had left him unconscious and unable to carry out the duties of the crown. But the most disturbing question was not why Camilla left. It was what William and Anne had discovered minutes before she ran. William entered the white drawing room with hands locked around a folded statement. Anne followed one step behind, pale, rigid, and visibly furious. They did not wait for the room to settle. William looked into the cameras and said his father had suffered a severe cardiac crisis after a closed briefing inside Windsor Castle.
This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. As you can imagine, this has taken time.
Charles had collapsed without warning. His heart rhythm had become dangerously unstable. Doctors had suspended every engagement and constitutional responsibility until further notice. William's voice remained firm, but when he said, "My father," his breath caught, and the room froze. Anne's face revealed what the statement did not. She had seen the medical reports. She knew how long the warning signs had allegedly been hidden. When a palace aide suggested describing the emergency as a temporary indisposition, Anne turned toward him and stopped him with one look. This was not a missed engagement. According to palace rumors, Charles had remained unresponsive through several critical minutes, and doctors could not promise that another episode would end the same way. A sealed red dispatch box was being carried away from the King's suite and placed outside William's private room. Before the announcement ended, staff were asking the question no one dared raise publicly. Why was Camilla not standing beside William and Anne? Why had her vehicle left through Windsor's most guarded exit? And why had she reportedly demanded that no palace official follow her? The answer was said to be locked inside a medical file, bearing 2 sets of initials, and one belonged to the woman who had just fled the palace.
I genuinely think it's so bad that the King might have to stand aside, and I genuinely have a way out for him, which is to say that his medical situation is the reason that he's doing that. We will all know it's for the good of the royal family, and they start with a clean slate with William and Kate.
Hi viewers, if you are glad Prince William and Princess Anne finally stood up to Camilla and stopped her from controlling what the public was allowed to know, then prove that you stand with them. Comment yes, like this video, share it, and subscribe right now. Watching silently only gives the same palace secrecy another chance to continue. William continued reading, but the words were failing him. He confirmed that Charles had lost consciousness and required immediate emergency treatment. Specialists had restored a stable rhythm, but dangerous complications remained. The King could not meet ministers, approve urgent papers, receive diplomatic briefings, or appear before the public. No date for recovery was given. No promise of a return was offered. Each sentence sounded controlled, yet each stripped away reassurance. Anne stood beside him, holding a white handkerchief she never used. Her eyes remained fixed on the back wall. When William reached the final line, he pushed the statement aside. He said Charles was fighting, but could no longer carry the burden alone. Anne looked toward him. The Princess Royal was no longer protecting the institution. She was a sister who believed her brother had been allowed to walk toward disaster, while everyone pretended not to see it. The cameras stopped, but the crisis deepened when the doors closed. A senior private secretary waited in the corridor with the red dispatch box against his chest. These boxes carried government papers, security briefings, and urgent decisions meant for the sovereign. William stared at it and asked why it was not beside his father. The secretary said doctors had forbidden Charles from handling state business. William asked who authorized the transfer. The man said there was a signed emergency instruction. Anne demanded to see it. The secretary hesitated. The instruction had been sealed before the latest collapse, he admitted, but its contents were known only to a circle of advisors. William's expression changed. If the document existed before that morning, then Charles had known the danger was greater than anyone had been told. The crisis was no longer sudden. It was the end of a secret.
This is a season when our thoughts turn to celebrations with our friends and families. In the midst of this festive period, I just wanted to ask you to join me today in finding a special place in your hearts and your minds and prayers for the hundreds of thousands of people across our United Kingdom who receive a cancer diagnosis each year, and for the millions more who love and care for them.
Inside the medical suite, Charles lay beneath white sheets while monitors traced the fragile rhythm of his heart. Charles opened his eyes once. He did not ask about the announcement or the government. He asked whether William and Anne had received the file. The doctor said yes. Charles closed his eyes and turned toward the window. He did not ask where Camilla was. That omission reached her before the Range Rover left the grounds. Camilla had spent an hour outside the medical wing while doctors spoke privately with William and Anne. A cup of tea sat untouched beside her until it went cold. She asked an aide why the king's wife had been excluded. The aide lowered his eyes and said the doctors wanted the king's children present for a matter involving emergency authority. Camilla rose and walked toward the consultation room as Anne emerged carrying a cream folder marked confidential. She stepped into Anne's path and demanded to know what had been decided. Anne said nothing had been decided. The doctors had presented the truth. Camilla asked why that truth had been given to William and Anne before her. Anne answered that the palace could no longer manage Charles's condition through silence and careful phrases. Camilla accused her of turning a medical crisis into a struggle for control. Anne said control was what had brought them here. Someone had controlled the schedule. Someone had controlled the reports. Someone had decided what William was allowed to know. Camilla insisted that Charles had made his own decisions, and no one could have forced him to stop working. William entered carrying the specialist's summary. He asked Camilla whether Charles had shown symptoms before the collapse. She said he had been tired. William asked again. Camilla admitted there had been dizziness, breathlessness, and pressure in his chest, but said Charles dismissed them as strain. William wanted to know when. Her silence confirmed the warning had not begun that morning. Anne asked the question William could not yet say. Who knew? Camilla glanced toward the medical door. Then she said she had known about one incident, but Charles made her promise not to alarm the family. William's grief hardened into anger. He asked whether she understood that his father could have died while he remained unaware. Camilla replied that Charles feared panic and pressure to step aside. Anne answered that fear did not excuse concealment when a life was at risk. Before Camilla could respond, a nurse rushed from the suite and called for the senior cardiologist. The monitor changed pitch. A physician ordered everyone away from the entrance. Charles had developed another rhythm disturbance. Camilla tried to move past Anne, but Anne blocked the doorway and told her the doctors needed space. Camilla demanded to be allowed through. Anne refused. Camilla said she was his wife, not a visitor. Anne answered that love did not cancel medical orders. Camilla stepped back and looked at William. He did not overrule his aunt. Something in her expression broke. She turned, walked toward her rooms, and ordered an aide to pack a leather case. By the time security prepared the vehicle, William had opened the folder. The first pages described the collapse. Then he reached a date from 3 weeks earlier. During an investiture rehearsal in St. George's Hall, Charles had gripped a chair, lost all color, and failed to answer when Anne called his name. 11 seconds passed before he responded. William read the entry twice. The incident had been removed from the general royal briefing and described as a scheduling interruption. A physician had recommended immediate heart testing, rest, and cancelled engagements. Yet within days, The appointments vanished, and official meetings returned. At the bottom of the page sat the order restricting the report from William. 2 sets of initials appeared beside it. One belonged to Charles, the other belonged to Camilla. Outside, the Range Rover accelerated beyond the private gate. Inside, William closed the file and looked toward Anne.
I know from my own experience that a cancer diagnosis can feel overwhelming. Yet, I also know that early detection is the key that can transform treatment journeys, giving invaluable time to medical teams and to their patients the precious gift of hope.
The woman fleeing Windsor had not merely known Charles was unwell, she had helped keep the warning from the air. But neither William nor Anne understood the darkest part of the secret. The file contained one more sealed page, and across its front were 5 words written in Charles's own hand. Do not allow Camilla control. The heavy oak doors of St. George's Hall slammed shut, the sudden bang echoing like a gunshot through the vaulted stone archways. Inside, King Charles stood frozen beside an empty chair, his hand trembling so violently that the gilded program in his grip fluttered to the polished floor. For 11 long, agonizing seconds, the monarch did not breathe, his eyes staring blankly into the distance, while Princess Anne lunged forward, catching his arm just as his knees began to buckle under his weight. She barked an order to clear the room, her voice slicing through the stunned silence of the rehearsing courtiers. Charles managed to gasp for air, his face pale and slick with sweat. But when the royal physicians arrived with an emergency stretcher, he flatly refused it. He would not enter an ambulance, he insisted through gritted teeth, because he knew that a single photograph of him on a gurney would ignite global panic and forever destroy the image of a stable reign. The immediate aftermath was swift and ruthless. A specialist strictly advised 3 weeks of total bed rest, warning that his cardiovascular system was showing signs of severe exhaustion and dangerous arrhythmia. Charles initially agreed to the medical demands, but within 48 hours, the official calendars began quietly shifting back to their original, relentless schedule. Meetings were reinstated under the guise of urgent state affairs, and private audiences were restored to his diary. When Princess Anne discovered the alterations, she stormed into his study, accusing her brother of confusing raw stubbornness with royal duty. She told him directly that surviving a crown meant nothing if he killed himself trying to wear it. Yet Charles remained immovable, convinced that stepping back, even temporarily, would signal to the world and to his own family that his time was ending. Back in the present day, deep within the private offices of Windsor Castle, Prince William stood over a mahogany desk, reading through the redacted briefing documents from that exact week. The paper trail revealed a calculated effort to erase the incident from official memory. The medical warning had been systematically scrubbed from the daily reports delivered to William, ensuring he remained completely in the dark, while his father's health quietly teetered on the edge of catastrophe. Further down the file, an internal log from a palace footman added another chilling detail to the narrative. The servant had reported finding the king leaning heavily against a stone wall in the private quarters after a small dinner party, clutching his chest and gasping for breath while attempting to conceal his distress from passing staff. William's hands shook as he turned the page, discovering that the concealment had gone far beyond simple royal pride. Tucked into the back of the file was an administrative memo explicitly instructing staff to route all health updates away from the Prince of Wales. Beside the order, signed with clear authority, were the familiar initials of Queen Camilla. She had participated directly in the decision to suppress the medical warnings, agreeing that William should not be burdened during a demanding period of public duties. To William, the revelation felt less like family protection and far more like a deliberate attempt to keep the heir to the throne isolated from the true state of the monarchy. Anne stood beside him in the dim light of the office, her eyes fixed on the handwritten initials. She pointed out that the decision to hide the collapse was not merely an act of a stubborn king trying to keep his independence. Someone else had helped him construct the wall of silence, actively shielding the truth from the very people who would be forced to pick up the pieces if he fell. The realization hardened William's resolve, transforming his grief into a sharp, icy clarity. Look closely at your own family, viewers, because when those you love choose to keep dangerous secrets to protect themselves, you have to ask who they are really protecting. If you believe a son deserves the truth about his father's survival, click the subscribe button right now and leave a comment below stating if you would ever forgive this level of deception. The investigation into the palace paper trail uncovered more than just hidden medical notes. It exposed a culture of quiet obedience that allowed the king's deteriorating condition to be treated as a routine inconvenience, rather than a constitutional crisis. Palace aides, bound by traditional loyalty to the reigning monarch, had repeatedly turned a blind eye to obvious signs of physical decline. Cancelled appointments were routinely re-entered into the system, and public engagements were restructured to minimize walking distances, all designed to give the illusion of an active, healthy ruler. Every safeguard meant to protect the institution had failed because no one had the courage to confront the sovereign directly, except for the sister he refused to listen to and the wife who chose to validate his denial. As William continued to turn the pages, the full extent of the calculated silence became unmistakably clear. The doctors had explicitly documented that any subsequent episode could prove fatal if not managed with immediate, aggressive medical intervention. Yet, knowing this precise danger, the inner circle had allowed Charles to continue his grueling pace, betting the stability of the crown on the faint hope that his heart would simply hold out. Camilla had framed her silence as an act of devotion, arguing internally that keeping the king calm was the best way to maintain his health. But to William and Anne, that devotion looked remarkably like an attempt to keep control over the royal household, ensuring that authority remained centered around the king and those who had his ear. The atmosphere inside the palace grew thicker with suspicion as the hours ticked on. Staff members moved through the corridors with hushed voices and lowered eyes, fully aware that a major breach of trust had occurred at the highest levels of the royal family. William confronted the senior private secretary, demanding to know how deep the suppression ran and who else had authorized the missing reports. The secretary, caught between his duty to the reigning king and his obligations to the heir, could only offer an apology, admitting that the pressure to maintain normalcy had overridden standard protocol. It was a failure of the entire system, one that left the future of the monarchy hanging by a thread, while the king lay unconscious in his private suite. Anne stepped toward the window, watching the rain beat against the heavy glass panes of the castle. She noted that the crisis was no longer just about a sudden medical emergency. It was about a systematic effort to manage a king's decline in total secret, leaving the nation entirely unprepared for the shock that was now unfolding. The brief 11-second collapse in St. George's Hall had been a clear warning shot, a terrifying preview of the collapse that had finally brought the palace to its knees. By hiding that warning, Camilla and the inner circle had robbed the family of precious time, forcing a chaotic, emergency transition instead of a measured, transparent handover. William closed the folder with a sharp, heavy thud that resonated through the room. The paper trail was complete, and the evidence was undeniable. The woman who had fled the castle just hours earlier had not simply been overwhelmed by shock or grief. She had left because the wall of secrecy she helped construct had finally crumbled, leaving her exposed to the rage of a son who had been systematically lied to about his father's life. The crisis had evolved from a tragic medical story into a bitter internal war, and the first major battle line had just been drawn inside the walls of Windsor Castle. Anne turned back to William, her expression cold and unyielding as she looked at the evidence sitting on the desk between them. She said quietly that the time for polite family diplomacy was over, and that they were now dealing with a betrayal that went straight to the core of the crown. The king was fighting for his life in the next room, but the struggle for truth and control over his legacy had already begun, setting the stage for a confrontation that would alter the royal family forever. The heavy double doors of the medical suite burst open as Prince William and Princess Anne strode into the hushed room, carrying the sealed cream folder directly toward the king's bedside. King Charles sat propped up against a mountain of white pillows, his skin pale and translucent under the harsh glare of the cardiac monitors, but his eyes flared with immediate anger at the sight of the documents in his son's hand. William did not hesitate or offer a warm greeting. He dropped the file onto the edge of the mattress, demanding to know why his own father had systematically cut him off from the truth regarding his failing heart. Charles recoiled, his voice raspy and defensive, as he demanded to know who had dared to remove confidential medical files from his doctor's private office without his explicit royal permission. William's expression remained rigid as he informed his father that state dispatch papers were already being redirected to his desk, making the secrecy not only pointless but dangerously irresponsible. He looked his father in the eye and stated that he was being asked to step up and lead, while still being kept in the dark about whether the king would survive another sudden episode. Princess Anne stepped forward, her sharp tone leaving no room for royal protocol or self-pity. She forced Charles to confront the brutal reality of his 11-second collapse during the rehearsal, and reminded him of the solemn promise he had made to rest, a promise he had broken the very moment he felt strong enough to hold a pen. Under the relentless pressure from his sister and son, the monarch's defensive anger finally cracked, exposing a deep, vulnerable well of insecurity. Charles looked away, his voice dropping to a fragile whisper as he admitted the terrifying truth behind his actions. Stepping back, he confessed, made him feel utterly useless, and seeing William handle constitutional affairs with calm efficiency filled him with a quiet horror that the monarchy was already moving on without him. He had fought his entire life to reach the throne, and the thought of surrendering his duties to his heir felt like a slow, living death. Stories like this are not only about crowns, titles, or ancient royalty. They are about what raw, pathetic fear can make a family conceal from the people who love them most. If you are sitting there watching this and know the crushing weight of being lied to by those you trusted, hit that share button right now and subscribe to show that you stand for truth over deception. The physical cost of that terrifying vanity was spelled out clearly in the specialist report sitting on the bed. The head physician stepped into the room, breaking the tense silence to confirm the harsh reality of the king's condition. Even if the current cardiac rhythm stabilized over the coming days, forcing himself back into his previous schedule would almost certainly trigger a catastrophic, irreversible event. The doctor made it abundantly clear that the king's heart could no longer handle the extreme stress of public life, and that continuing to fake full strength was a direct path to an early grave. Realizing that his resistance had run out, Charles reluctantly agreed to sign an emergency directive to protect the stability of the crown. With a trembling hand, the king dictated the terms of the temporary power transfer to the senior private secretary standing nearby. Prince William would immediately take full control of external public duties, government communications, and urgent state decisions, effectively acting as the operational voice of the sovereign. Princess Anne was tasked with supervising the internal household, enforcing strict medical compliance, and controlling every piece of health communication released to the public. While the legal terms were being drafted, a quiet commotion echoed from the outer hallway. Queen Camilla had just arrived outside the medical suite, only to find 2 armed security officers blocking the entrance on direct orders from the medical team. She demanded immediate entry, but the senior private secretary stepped out to inform her that a crucial legal meeting was currently underway with the king's doctors and advisors. Camilla's face twisted with disbelief as she realized that the most significant constitutional document of Charles's reign was being created just feet away from her, and she had been intentionally excluded from the room. The atmosphere in the corridor turned razor-sharp as Camilla attempted to assert her authority over the staff, insisting that no directive concerning her husband could be finalized without her input. But inside the room, the legal team continued working without pause, embedding clear, unambiguous clauses into the document to prevent any interference with the new structure. William sat beside his father, watching the pen move across the parchment, fully aware that this document would alter the balance of power within the royal household forever. Charles looked exhausted, beaten by his own physical limitations, and forced to sign away the very control he had spent decades waiting to claim. The senior private secretary returned to the bedside with the final drafted document, clearing his throat before reading the key clauses aloud to ensure total legal clarity. The final paragraph contained a strict, unyielding condition that struck at the very heart of the palace power structure. It stated explicitly that during any period of the king's medical incapacity, no family member outside the designated emergency leadership team was permitted to issue official statements or exercise authority in the monarch's name. The language was precise, legalistic, and utterly absolute, leaving zero room for interpretation or backroom manipulation. As the words filled the room, the full weight of the clause settled over the space, making the intent behind it unmistakably clear. Prince William looked at the private secretary, then back at his father, recognizing that this was not just a safety measure against administrative chaos. It was a direct, calculated barrier constructed specifically to freeze Camilla out of constitutional decision-making. The silence in the bedroom was total, punctuated only by the rhythmic, steady beep of the cardiac monitor, tracking the king's fragile heart. The private secretary handed the fountain pen to King Charles, who stared at the signature line for a long, agonizing moment before pressing the nib to the paper. His signature was shaky, lacking its usual bold flourish, but it sealed the agreement with total legal force. Outside the closed doors, Camilla heard the faint murmur of approval from the legal advisors inside and immediately understood what had transpired. The authority she had carefully cultivated beside her husband had just been dismantled in a single hour, stripped away by the very doctors and family members she had tried to keep at bay. The door finally opened, and William stepped out into the hallway, holding the newly executed legal directive, his face set like stone as he made eye contact with Camilla. The tension between them was palpable, an immovable wall of silence replacing any pretense of family unity. Camilla stared at the document in his hands, realizing that every access point to the king's authority had been systematically closed, leaving her isolated inside the very palace she had sought to manage. The stage was now set for an explosive, final confrontation in the corridors of Windsor, as the reality of Charles's choice began to fully sink in. The high heels clicked violently against the marble floor of the private corridor as Queen Camilla rounded the corner, her face pale with fury, as she blocked Prince William and Princess Anne in their tracks. She did not hesitate or lower her voice, instantly accusing them of turning the king's life-threatening medical emergency into a ruthless political coup to strip her of her rightful place. William stood his ground, his gaze unwavering, as he stated firmly that he had never asked for this burden, nor had he schemed to take it. Princess Anne stepped forward, her shadow stretching across the cold stone wall, and informed the Queen with icy precision that the emergency arrangement was not a power grab, but a direct order born from Charles's own hand. Camilla demanded to walk past them into her husband's room, but the sudden piercing alarm of a medical monitor inside the suite forced the head physician to physically bar the entrance. The doctors were once again battling another sudden, dangerous heart rhythm disturbance, and they made it brutally clear that no visitors, regardless of rank or title, would be allowed near the king. Camilla turned her rage on Anne, insisting that being the sovereign's wife gave her absolute right over his care. Anne did not flinch, looking her sister-in-law in the eyes and telling her that devotion did not give anyone permission to override critical medical orders or sacrifice a man's life for pride. The confrontation tore through the quiet hall, escalating further when Camilla learned the true scope of the new arrangement. Princess Anne now commanded the entire household and controlled every single medical update released to the world, while William held sole authority to speak for the crown. Camilla argued bitterly that she knew Charles better than anyone in the room, claiming her presence was the only thing keeping him calm. Anne fired back with devastating bluntness, stating that knowing him had not stopped his sudden collapse, nor had it prevented the dangerous cover-up that brought them to this brink. If you are watching this right now and feel disgusted by people who use a loved one's weakest moment to fight for control, you need to share this video immediately. Subscribe to this channel right now, because staying silent only allows the absolute worst intentions to stay hidden in the dark. 2 senior legal advisors stepped into the dimly lit corridor, carrying the sealed leather folder that held the official, executed directive. Camilla scoffed at the sight of the legal team, claiming aggressively that Charles could not possibly have approved such a document in his chaotic medical state, insisting his mind was clouded by heavy medication and fear. But the senior private secretary stepped forward, unsealing the document to reveal a truth that shattered her entire defense. The emergency order had not been drawn up in the frantic minutes following his sudden collapse on the floor. It had been carefully drafted days before, fully prepared, while the king was entirely conscious and alert. The revelation left Camilla speechless, the cold reality settling in as she realized that her own husband had laid the groundwork for her exclusion. She turned away from the family without another word, her shoulders rigid as she walked swiftly back toward her private royal apartments. Inside her rooms, behind closed doors, staff members watched in total disbelief as the Queen instructed her personal aide to pack a small leather travel case with her immediate essentials. Outside, in the secluded courtyard, armed security personnel received urgent, hushed orders over their radios to prepare a discreet dark vehicle at the palace's side entrance. Palace aides looked on from distant windows as the luggage was carried down the quiet back staircase toward the waiting car. The atmosphere inside the royal residence was thick with unspoken shock, as word began to spread that the Queen was leaving the premises while the monarch remained under critical care. Every official protocol was being shattered in real time, exposing a rift so deep that not even the threat of losing the king could hold the family together under one roof. Camilla walked out through the private side doors, her head held high as she stepped into the rear of the black Range Rover. The vehicle's heavy doors clicked shut, cutting off the faint sound of the castle clocks chiming in the distance. The security detail moved quickly, clearance lights flashing as the car slowly rolled across the damp gravel, heading straight toward the guarded perimeter gate. Inside the quiet office, Princess Anne pulled the original handwritten draft out of its heavy paper envelope, her fingers tracing the ink at the very bottom of the page. William stood beside her, watching as she held the paper up to the light to examine the official seal. The handwritten date, written beside the king's shaky signature, was unmistakable, written clearly, in his own distinct penmanship, days before the sudden cardiac event. King Charles had signed the emergency directive while fully aware of his actions, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had intentionally placed William and Anne in power, specifically ensuring his wife could not override their decisions when the inevitable crisis finally arrived. The heavy iron gates of Windsor Castle ground shut with a hollow, metallic reverberation, locking out the gathering morning mist, just as the first quiet whispers of Queen Camilla's sudden flight began circulating through the palace corridors. Inside the private wing, senior staff moved with hushed urgency, attempting to suppress competing leaks and control the narrative before international news outlets seized upon the royal departure. Prince William stood at the window of his temporary office, looking down at the vacant driveway while refusing every suggestion from advisors to sit in the king's throne room chair or pose for official photographs that might frame this sudden administrative transition as a personal victory. Princess Anne moved swiftly through the household, shutting down internal factions, revoking unauthorized press clearances, and establishing an unyielding standard of discipline across every department. William walked into his father's dimly lit medical room, where the rhythmic monitor beeps provided the only steady heartbeat in the silent castle. King Charles lay still, his face drawn and weary, but his mind lucid as his son approached the bedside to deliver the news that Camilla had left the grounds. The king closed his eyes for a long moment, showing no shock or anger, but rather a tragic, quiet acceptance that confirmed what he had known all along. In a raspy, low voice, Charles revealed the painful truth behind his actions, explaining that he had deliberately crafted the emergency directive after his earlier collapse because he realized his wife's fierce instinct to protect his image was actively endangering the crown. He knew her overwhelming desire to shelter him would lead her to block medical reality and resist the necessary transfer of authority to his rightful heir. Charles looked at William and confirmed that neither he nor Anne had forced his hand or manipulated his weakness to grab control. The choice had been entirely his own, made in a rare moment of stark clarity before his heart failed him. He had chosen William because the heir possessed the institutional stability to carry the state forward, and he had chosen Anne because she alone had the courage to enforce ruthless boundaries that no one else in the palace dared to touch. The final, chilling truth stood fully exposed, proving that Camilla had not fled because of a sudden family argument, but because she discovered her own husband had intentionally neutralized her power before he collapsed. Camilla may have left Windsor Castle in the dark of night, but the quiet question now tearing the royal household apart is whether she will accept a diminished role beside a weakened king, or launch a public challenge against the authority given to Prince William and Princess Anne. If you care about the survival of the crown and refuse to let the powerful hide their choices behind palace walls, leave your opinion in the comments below right now. Share this story with everyone you know, and hit that subscribe button immediately. At her secluded private residence, Camilla opened the formal courier envelope containing her official copy of the signed directive. Reading the precise legal terms written in her husband's own hand, the full weight of her reality became clear, leaving her with a stark choice between accepting total exclusion from state affairs or remaining isolated from the center of power. Meanwhile, back at Windsor, Prince William and Princess Anne finalized the second national address, carefully framing the arrangement to reassure the public that King Charles remained sovereign while permanently scaling back his official duties. The immediate emergency had been contained, but the deep fractures within the royal family remained wide open, laying the groundwork for an even larger storm brewing just beneath the surface. Behind closed doors, an undisclosed ledger from the king's personal desk has just been discovered, containing private notes that name the exact individual inside the household who leaked his initial medical condition to the press. Do not miss our very next episode, where we unseal the contents of that hidden ledger and reveal the shock identity of the palace insider who betrayed King Charles from within his own inner circle. As the heavy gates of Windsor remained locked tight against the outside world, the signed emergency directive rested beside the king's red dispatch box on the bedside table, its sharp ink signature standing as a permanent testament to the night the monarchy shifted forever.